we decided to do the home birth, and we had the pool here. And on April 23rd, I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning having contractions. They weren't strong. They didn't really hurt. It was different from Braxton Hicks. And they were more intense. And there was pressure. But they didn't hurt at all. It was just kind of a tightening and a pressure. And similar to a cramp. And so I started timing them, and at that point they were about 15 minutes apart and about 30 seconds long. And then Trevor woke up to go to work at about 7:30, and I let him get up and brush his teeth and kind of get around. And he walked in, and I was like, hey, I think I'm in labor. And he was like, what? Sure you are. Like, yeah, right. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm in labor. This is different, and it's lasting a lot longer than any like Braxton Hicks that I've had before, any kind of contractions. And he's like, okay. And I was like, well, don't go to work yet. Just go in late maybe, and I'm going to take a shower and see if they go away from a shower, drink some water, see if I'm just dehydrated. And so I drank a big glass of water, and then I took a shower. And when I got out of the shower, I was drying myself off, and I had a little bit of bloody show, which if you're pregnant, you'll know. If you don't know now, you'll read about it. Hopefully, you'll read a book and read about it. But basically, the bloody show, it's not really that bloody. It's just, there's a little bit of blood. And it's just a sign that your cervix is dilating. So when I got out of the shower, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm definitely in labor. And he's like, nuh-uh, no, you're not. And I was like, no, yeah, I am. And so he called into work and told them, my wife's in labor, I won't be able to come in today. But he still didn't believe me. At about 10 o'clock, I called my best friend, and I told her, because she was planning on coming over anyways that day, I told her to bring her bag or whatever it is, her stuff, because I was in labor. And so she needed to come over, and she would be there for a while. So, and then next I called my mom, and I told her, and she knew. Like, she knew when I called. She could tell in my voice or something that it was time, and it was time to come over. And so she left work over her lunch break and came. I called, I'm trying to remember who all I called. I know I called my mom. I think I called my grandma. And I might have talked to my dad. I don't remember, it's so blurry. Before I called all those people, I called my midwife. As soon as I got out of the shower and saw my bloody show, I called my midwife and I said, I'm in labor. And so she told me to call her again when my contractions were 5 minutes apart and lasting a minute long. Or about like that. And that was at about, I want to say, my mom was already there when she came. So it would have been around noon-ish when that happened. And so she came, and I was on the couch having my contractions, and they were still not bad at all. And I had been in labor for over 6 hours by then, and they didn't start hurting for a while. And then she decided to check me, and by the time she got there, I was dilated to a 3, which I was a little bit disappointed. I was hoping that I would be dilated more than that, but I wasn't. But she also noticed that, I don't remember what it's called, there's a name for it, but that my cervix was on the wrong part of his head. It's when you're in labor, your cervix is supposed to be on the back part of their head, like right here, but it was right here instead. And so I wasn't dilating as much as I should have been. And so she told me what she was going to have to do. She told me that she's going to have to move my cervix to the right part of his head so that I could continue to dilate, because it would just put more pressure on my cervix and it wouldn't be able to dilate all the way. Huh. And so she said that she told me that it's going to hurt a lot and that she had to do it during a contraction, and that there would be a huge release of hormones as soon as she did it. So I was like, okay, so she did it, and she had to do it during a contraction and hold it there throughout the contraction. And this was when Trevor realized finally that I was really in labor. Not when the midwife showed up, not when my contractions started getting stronger and closer together. No. It was when the midwife showed up and moved my cervix, and I was obviously in pain. And even thinking of that, it was more of like a shock than pain, but it definitely hurt. And then my contractions became a lot stronger after that. And so I labored on my side in bed for a while. I don't remember how long. And they filled up the pool, and about the time that my contractions started getting really strong and uncomfortable, I was able to get into the warm water of the pool, and it just took all of the pressure off. It felt so much better to get in that pool. I just remember sitting in it and just being like, oh, this feels so good. And it was just being weightless, I guess. I don't know, between that and the heat. Because a lot of my labor, it was in my hips. My hips hurt the whole time. That's where it hurt. It wasn't anywhere else. It was just my hips. And so I had to stay up on all fours or leaning forward to try to keep my cervix on the right part of his head so that I would continue to dilate. It seems like she checked me like an hour or two later, and I had only dilated to a 4, and it had moved back to that part of his head, and she said that I wouldn't dilate. And so she had me get in this position to where my butt was like up in the air, and I'm pretty much upside down, and that hurt so bad. I hated being in that position. But I was like that off and on for about an hour, and in that hour I dilated from a 4 to a 7. And then I couldn't stay upside down anymore. I was getting tired, so I got back in the pool for a while, and the whole time I had to be leaning forward and on all fours, so I really didn't get to rest throughout my labor like I wanted to. I expected to be able to kind of sit down and try to relax, but I couldn't. I had to stay up on all fours. And so the rest of the night I was like in and out of the pool, whatever was the most comfortable for me to do. And then she had me change positions regularly. I had to change positions regularly to try to get it to move to the right part of his head, and it just wasn't going to. So, I don't know what time. Time went by so fast while I was in labor. I was in labor for a total of 19 hours, but it felt like 2 or 3 maybe. It went by extremely quickly for me. Anyways, so I wasn't dilating fast enough, or not fast enough. I wasn't dilating at all, but I was beyond effaced. And if you don't know what that means when you're in labor, your cervix has to come forward a certain amount, and it has to dilate a certain amount. And when you're fully effaced, you're at a 0, and when you're fully dilated, you're 10 centimeters dilated. Well, I was like +4 effaced, and I was only dilated to a 7. And so she told me that she had to move my cervix again. And so I was like, and I knew how uncomfortable I was. And as soon as I started freaking out, like stressing about that, that was the worst part of my labor, was while I was stressing about it. And I was just, it was one contraction after another, after another, after another. And there was no break in between. And that's what was hard. I think having the break between contractions is really the important part. That's what makes it so manageable. And so so she told me that she had everybody leave the room so that it was just me and Trevor. And me and Trevor had a little talk at that point. And he told me my options were to either let her do it and have the baby, or go to the hospital and have a C-section. And so I was like, I am not going to the hospital. That is not happening. No way. And so we decided, okay, I'll let her do it. And I was just, at that point, I was very uncomfortable and hot in the pool, and I wanted out. So we got out, and I decided I wanted to have him in the bed in the moment. It's what just sounded good. So we got up. I changed out of my swimsuit into like a sports bra, and I got ready, and she moved it, and it was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. Was that moment when she moved my cervix and held it there. But soon as she was done, I dilated right away to a 9. And then and my contractions were so much easier after that. Knowing now if I had known then what I know now, I would have let her do it several times, and just to keep things moving quickly. But instead I had to be stubborn and not let her do what she needed to do. So then I dilated to a 9. I got up and I had to pee, so I went to the bathroom. While I was in the bathroom, I asked her if I could push a little bit, and she said, yeah, go ahead. So I pushed a few times, not hard, just a little bit, because it relieves the pressure to push. It feels good at that point to push. And then I moved back to the bed, and by the time I was back in bed, like between the bathroom and the bed, which is like 3 feet away from each other, my water broke. Like, it really broke. Trevor thinks that I had a slow leak for a while, but my water like actually broke and like went everywhere. And so I got back in the bed, and by then I was fully dilated, and she let me start pushing. And this was the first time that I got to actually like push hard, and I felt everything. I felt him move down, and I felt things stretch, and I let out what my friend, who also had a home birth, I let out a warrior cry is what she calls it. So, and then my midwife told me, like, all of the energy that I put into that scream, I need to put into pushing, because it'll get him out faster. So I was like, okay. I don't know how long I pushed. It didn't seem like very long to me, but it might have to other people. So I started pushing, and it seemed like just 2 pushes, and I could see the top. He was to the point to where you could see about that much of the top of his head, and you could feel it. And so she had me reach down and feel it, which she thought would be motivating for me, which it wasn't really. I was just like, wow, he's there, but okay. And then she got a mirror, and she held up a mirror, and I could actually see the top of his head. And from the time that I could see the top of his head to the time that he was out, I didn't feel any more pain. It changed everything. Like, I all of a sudden had this new, like, a 6th wind of energy, and I had more determination than I had ever had in my life to get him out. And so even without having a contraction, I wanted to push. I just wanted to push until he came out. And my aunt actually told me that whenever I saw his head, the very top of his head, she said my whole demeanor changed. Because honestly, the whole time I was in labor, I just kept saying, like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, just over and over and over again. And it was so hard for Trevor to hear me say that I couldn't do it. But as soon as I saw the top of his head, I was like, I'm going to do this. As soon as I saw the top of his head, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have a baby. I can do this. And so I don't remember much of anything. The only thing I really remember about how it felt was part of it was seeing it in the mirror too, because I was able to watch him come out, was feeling it stretch, but it didn't hurt that I remember. And I remember telling her to put pressure, because she was putting pressure so that I wouldn't tear, but as soon as she let go, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna tear. So she put pressure back on it for me, and I really think that helped. It kept me from tearing, for sure. And anyways, so it seems like it wasn't very long, and he crowned, and then he came out. Like, his whole head was out, and when his head was out, I was like, oh my God, this is weird. Like, there's a head hanging out of my body. What in the world? And then I had to wait the longest time between pushes with his head out, because his body had to turn to be able to come out the rest of the way. And so then I was finally able to push, and one push later, he was out. He was out the rest of the way. And apparently his cord had been wrapped around his neck 2 or 3 times. And so that's why his head wouldn't go down like it needed to for me to dilate. His cord was wrapped around his neck, and he had his fist right here. And she said that I was actually really lucky that happened, because it could have been not a good thing. So as soon as he came out, I was just like in shock. I couldn't believe that I just had a baby. It was like the most amazing experience of my life. If I could give birth and go through the labor and delivery again, I totally would. And without being pregnant. Like, I would have 1 million babies and not be pregnant. Pregnancy was way worse than giving birth. And figuring out how to breastfeed, and the first month postpartum was way worse. I think that labor and delivery and giving birth, the whole thing, it just has a bad rap. I think that anything worth having or worth doing in life it's probably going to hurt a little bit. Like, but it's worth it. It's worth having that experience, and it's worth being able to have a new confidence in yourself and a new confidence in your body. And so I try to encourage everyone I know that is pregnant. You don't have to have a home birth if you don't want to. If you're more comfortable in the hospital, that is fine. More power to you. I completely understand that. But have a birth plan, and don't do the drugs. Don't get an epidural, and don't take the Pitocin. Talk to your doctor in advance and tell them that you want to go into labor naturally, and you want to have your baby naturally, because the experience of the whole thing is so much better than what it could be. And I'm not saying that every experience people with giving birth that are on drugs is bad. It's not the same, because you don't come out of it with the same feelings and the same emotions. And it's such a huge deal. I think that it's not something that should be looked at as something negative. I think natural birth is something positive, and more people need to have faith in themselves. So anyways, that is my birth story. Sorry it's so long. I didn't want to miss any details, but that's my birth story. That's how this little person came into the world, and I look forward to doing it again because I'm not going to have an only child. And yeah, don't you think? Okay, bye!